Hey guys, welcome today to where we're going to kind of start into the beginnings of we're starting to understand the Pythagorean theorem. And before we can understand the Pythagorean theorem, we have to understand what a square root is. And you guys have heard that before. And I think a lot of you have heard things like, well, the square root of 25 is 5, which is completely true. But I guess what we're getting at is what is a square root? Let's find out today what a square root actually is. So if you take a look at the square that I've created here, it's pretty straightforward. It's a square, and I can tell because it's 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3. And so I have a 3 by 3 square, which means that it's the same length and the same width, and that I have four right angles. I can see that because it's right where an X and a Y cross perfectly. So I have to be dealing with a square here. And the next thing is if I asked you the area of that square, we'd be able to say that it was 9. And for a couple of different reasons, is we can say, well, that's 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3, which is 9. But actually, what that means is that I have 9 squares inside of this, 9 1 by 1 squares. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And each one of those are 1 by 1. And so I have 9 1 by 1 squares. And that's what area really is. Area is, well, I have the length and the width, and how many square ones does that create? And it creates 9 when I have a 3 by 3. So that's pretty straightforward. So what is the root of that square? Well, since we know a square's dimensions have to be the same, like the length and the width are the same, the square's root, in other words, what is that single length? Well, it's 3. And if you take a look at this, we can see that is that this length is 3, and this length is 3, and this area is 9 units squared, and that's units and units. Oh, I'm having a hard time writing here because it's not lined up very nicely. Oh, it's because my mouse is off. So 9. But when I ask you what's the square root of 9, so if I had a square and its area was 9, what would be that root? Well, it would be 3. And so we would say that the square root, in other words, the root that gives us this square of a square of 9, area 9, is 3 units. And so that's what we mean by square root. When we talk about square roots, we're saying, well, if I had a square and I had the area of that square, what would be the root or the length of the side of that square? And that's all that that means. That's it. It's probably nothing more complex than that, nothing more confusing. But that's it. That's all there is to it. So I'm going to clear that out, and let's try another one. Turn this one off and turn this one on. Oh my, look at this. Well, this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know that that is a square because it's 5 by 5. And knowing my times tables, that 5 by 5 is 25, I should have 25 1 by 1 boxes in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, five fives is 25. And so I have 25 boxes inside of here. That's it. That's all that that means. And so let's come back again. I know that I have 25 units inside of there. And so the root of that 25 is 5. And so the square root of 25 is 5. That's all that that means. So anytime you ask for a square root, what it really means is, well, what's the length of the side of the square with an area of 25, or whatever that number might be? And so if I ask you, so let's just say the square root, if I ask you for, sorry, if I ask you for the square root of, let's just say 4, that what that would mean was that I had a square. I don't know if I'm going to get this right. I had a square with an area of 4, and that its length would be the square root of 4 or 2. There you go, square roots. That's it. That's all that that means. All right, so let's do just a couple more of these and kind of test them out and make sure that we understand. And then we'll do a little bit of a challenge for you. So I'm going to turn that one off and turn a new one on. There's a square, and I know that its length is 1 and 1, which means it has to be a square. I know that there's one square inside of here, which means that the square root of 1 is 1 because it's 1 by 1, and 1 times 1 is 1. So that's another example of square roots. And lastly, oh my, what is this? Well, see, this gets a little more confusing because we're not totally sure what this is because it's hard to tell its area because we can't figure out this length right yet. Now, what we can do is what it appears to be is that looks like a half and a half and a half and a half, which would look like we have about a area of 2. So that would be my guess that I had area 2 right here, which would mean that this would be the square root of 2. We can check that. Let's check that. Well, here is my square. This is the strategy we learned in last class, which is 1, 2 by 1, 2. So the whole thing is 4, and I'm going to punch out these squares. Well, 1 by 1 is a triangle, which means it's just 1. So that means that that's got to be a half. I'm going to make my things a little small so I can draw. I should change that, but so that would be a half. And since these are all the same, that's also going to be a half and a half and a half. So that's a total of 2. So if I have this is 2 by 2, which is 4, and I take out 2, that means that the area would be 2, which is kind of what we guessed it to be based on the fact that I have all those half triangles in there. Hmm. Hmm. If that's the case, then what must be the length of that side? Well, the length of that side is going to be 2. And so I will clear this part off. And if I turn this guy back off again, and we figured out that the area of this is 2, well, that tells us that we do know now that the length of this side is the square root of 2. Now, that's not a nice, pretty number like we're used to dealing with because that's an area 2. It's not a nice, pretty number to deal with at all. But that's part of what we're going to learn about with square roots. Isn't it is a number, and it's you can plug it into your calculator, and it's going to be 1.6 something or other. So it's more than one, but less than two, right? 1.1 something. No, 1.3 something. Anyhow, so I'm going to go ahead and find that length, but it is an amount that we are going to use. It's a real number there, and um, so that means that that length is equal to square root of 2. All right, so that's to get started. So we're going to move on now. So go ahead and check the rest of your Schoology assignment, and I want you to go ahead and try some of these, practice them out, and referring back to the video if you need to. Okay. All right. Have a good one, and let